listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. For this episode, I'm at home. My guest, well, he's in Charlotte, North Carolina, the hub of motorsport and NASCAR in particular in the United States, almost 16,000 k's away from me. He's a proud Aussie who now calls America home, but he's never changed. Still very much with his feet on the ground, despite being in the record books as the first Australian to win races as a crew chief in the highest level of NASCAR. Pretty cool achievement, that. The Cup Series is the pinnacle for many. Formula One, IndyCar or World Rally would arguably be the only other forms of motorsport that you could put on a similar level. James Small is a driven bloke who could have absolutely made it as a racer, which is in part why he's so good at what he does now. You'll hear about how hard it was to let go and get a sense of just how clever he is. James studied engineering, has a thirst for vehicle dynamics, and he's competitive. Pretty good combo. Nowadays, he works for one of the big teams, Gibbs Racing, owned by the legendary NFL coach.
There he goes. He's won the Super Bowl of stock car racing. Joe Gibbs.
The path there took him via another iconic team in Richard Childress Racing, or RCR. James was successful in supercars before he headed over, playing a significant part in a Bathurst win for Ford Performance Racing and making a brave but brilliant call on the day that Lee Holdsworth would enter that select club of winners. You can hear Lee's recollections of that in his episode in the Rusty's Garage Library. A quick thanks to some friends and colleagues for little bits of intel for this discussion. To Lee Diffie, Jack Perkins, Stephen Richards, Tim Hodges and my producer Tom Dullard, who helped remind me of James's intensity, commitment, the sacrifices he's made along the way, a couple of cool backstories, and the immense pride when James took over from his Canadian colleague Cole Hearn as crew chief for the likeable Martin Truex Junior. We begin with a window into his early life and the Small family's deep connection to racing. It's no wonder he's ended up in NASCAR. James, welcome. This is awesome, mate, that we get to catch up. I love to start these conversations with a little something that paints a picture for listeners of early life, where you grew up, and I know the answer to this, but the kind of early motor racing influences for you.
Yeah, so obviously grew up Melbourne, Australia, and born into a racing family. My dad, Les, he was heavily involved in racing. And, when I came along in, 1983, he was deep into the, Australian touring car scene and heavily involved with Alan Grice and all of those guys. And from day dot, that's all I knew and grew up really around him and all the guys at the workshop there in Knoxfield in Melbourne.
There's great vision people can find on YouTube of an old Channel 7 clip of the Chickadee Commodore. It's the closing stages of the 86 race. Your dad's, I think, crew chief on the car for Alan Grice. He's about to win it. You're a 3-year-old basically at this stage. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And I wasn't there. I just remember that there was a lady who did on my dad's press back then, Pamela Lamb. She used to babysit me every Bathurst. So, we were there watching it on TV, and I still have memories of that. And it was cool time to grow up, that's for sure.
You grew up around it, mate, and I would cross paths with your dad at places like Oran Park. I want to say the Alcare Commodore and things like that were influences. He had ironically, where you've ended up now, he had a real sort of connection with Thunderdome and Oscar engines and a lot of that stuff. So you literally were around it, weren't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I still remember, standing up in the corporate hospitality area on the back straight, the first ever NASCAR race there out at the Thunderdome. So, he came over here, him and Alan, and did some, they did what was called the World 600 back at Charlotte. back in like I think 87 and 88, and that's when I started, getting into NASCAR. And there was always these weird American guys coming to our house that stayed that when they came out to race here. And
Like who? Like who?
one guy I remember as a guy, Bob Rahili, he owned the company Ray Mock, him and Butch Mock, who were like one of the bigger teams over here at the time, and they came out and their car actually won the first race with Neil Bonnet out there, and the big Christmas race when all the Yanks went out there. But
there you go.
it was I was. It's weird, where I am now versus back then to think that this could happen.
Can I, Jack Perkins has been helpful here with a little bit of intel or research, mate. He pointed out to me that maybe there is a BMX state title that you had as a youngster. Is that true? Have we got that right?
Yeah. So, my first racing escapades was BMX racing. So,
Mega.
yeah, it was family friends. Well, and a guy I went to school with, he was racing, and I went down to the track in Knox there one night, and then was hooked. And I did that for I don't know 3 years I think, and being from a racing family, we had all the trick stuff, and my dad's up there machining all titanium parts, and we've got like, I think he got so sick of paying retail price, he even opened a bike shop so he could buy everything at 50%. But me and my brother had a lot of success racing bikes, and we went and raced all around Australia. We were racing every weekend, and eventually, that kind of ended and then transitioned to, four wheels and motors.
Tell me about that. What was the push, or maybe the conversation, or obviously karting was kind of the next phase. How did that all come about?
So we used to go and race at Lilydale BMX track a lot, and there was an indoor go-kart track there on the way home. So every time we'd race there, we were going to indoor go-karts, and I was never allowed to race motocross. My mum wouldn't let me. And finally, it got to the point when my dad's like, okay, I think you're good enough now or whatever. Let's go and we'll get a go-kart and go out. So yeah, that happened, I think, when I was actually not super young. I was 9, I think. I think I was 9 when I started. And but before my first race, we went out to Oakley go-kart track there, and we practiced a lot after school, week after week. And I had another guy, Mike Donaldson, that used to come out, and between him and my dad, they'd stand on all the corners and make sure I hit all the right apexes. And so, yeah, and then my first ever race, I went out there and won every race and killed everybody, and they all thought we were cheating. So
You're a racer, right? And we'll ultimately get to the job that you're doing now, but it's clear, mate, you had the talent and you could have continued on that path. Was that the early ambition, the early want to be a driver?
Oh, 100%. That's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to go and race Formula One like every young kid. And, growing up, that was my aspirations. But also there was the realization that, my mum and dad weren't extremely well off. They worked hard and did everything to give us what we needed and try to support us as best as we could. But eventually, if we couldn't find money, we were going to run out of our own money. And that's where, I always had in the back of my mind, if I went to school and got an engineering degree, I could always fall back on that and then continue, to work in racing for the rest of my life.
Is there a story of you and Larry Perkins having a conversation and a promise that he made to you while you were at school? And I gather, mate, you were pretty smart when it came to your schoolwork. No wonder you've ended up in that sort of engineering space. What was the promise he made, and did he deliver?
Yeah, so I was in high school, and obviously, we spent a lot of time with Larry and Jack through go-karting, and obviously my dad knew him for forever. And Larry said, if you go and get your mechanical engineering degree, as soon as you're done, I'll give you a test in one of my cars. And I'm like, okay. And, we never spoke about it ever again. And, after all those years, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years later, I literally finished. So it was 2006. And I did that so I went to Swinburne University and we did that Formula SAE thing. And I think we finished that on the Sunday, and it was a week after not sleeping. And then I drove to Winton the next morning, and I think we tested, no, that next afternoon, Monday afternoon, and we tested all day Tuesday. And that was, he honored his deal. And, I think that same day Moff was testing and Timmy Blanchard, and it was the three of us, flogging around at Winton. And I think it was like 40 degrees outside. But, it went good. And, that test, I was going to go on Race Development Series the year after with Larry. And even do the endurance races in one of the JD cars. And then it all kind of fell over in, mid-January, and, because of funding for the other guy I was going to be running. And, it kind of killed my racing career.
Can we touch on, if you don't mind, just some of the gaps here before we get to supercars and things like that? Firstly, I'm told, mate, you have a scar on your arm from karting to this day. Now, this is an audio medium, so you're going to need to paint the picture here. You and I can see each other, obviously. You're in America. I'm at home. So you were so determined, am I right, to kind of save the kart, and there was something wrong, maybe a stuck throttle or a brake issue or something, and am I right, you grabbed the chain. Is that right?
No, so sounds stupid right now, doesn't it? But so we were racing at Ipswich, and it was the final. And it was Junior Intercontinental A in 1997, and my brakes ended up going out halfway through the race. They were barely working. So pretty much did the whole race, just kind of cruising, letting off, rolling through the corners, and, finished the race and got points or whatever for the championship. And rolling in the grid, the in-grid after the race. And, back then, you always saw guys going really slow. They'd put their hands on the back wheels and just kind of coast. But
yeah,
to this day, I really don't know what happened. I'd even done that before. And those karts had a clutch. So you'd roll in, shut the motor off, roll in, put my hands on there, and all of a sudden, my right arm, the chain somehow grabbed my suit and pulled my arm in, and it rotated around, and the sprocket just sawed my arm. And because I didn't want to run, I could have just run into the fence, and everyone would have been, oh, what's that guy doing? I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I could have run into a cart. I think that was Bart Price or Jamie in front of me. I can't even remember now. And I got out of the cart, and Bart's standing there, and he's like, holy shit. He's like, I'm like, what do you mean? My body must have just been in shock. And there was, my arm was just cut open, and, I think Gary Dumbrell grabbed me and took me to the hospital, and we drove to the hospital in Ipswich. And, they were in there. They had a toothbrush, and they were trying to, wash out all the Motul chain lube and dirt. And I think I had 60 stitches, of super thick, looked like fishing wire. Yeah, the guy said I was so lucky it missed the ulnar nerve by less than a millimeter. Otherwise, I would have lost.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was really, really lucky. So,
lucky.
Yes, that was an experience. I think for years I still had gravel coming out of my arm, appearing every. Yeah, it was weird.
You rattled off a couple of names there, mate. Can we just explore that a little bit? I mean, Bart Price, Gary Dumbrell. What about some of the others that you're on track with during this phase of your karting career? Who were you rubbing wheels with back then?
So, when I started, Jamie Whincup, I started and I was in midgets. He was in rookies. And then obviously my dad, knew Graham a lot. And Graham, his uncle, his shop was actually across the road from my dad's, literally right across the road. And so then obviously I moved up and raced against him. And then Will started racing, Davison in rookies. Obviously there's Bart Price. And then as we moved up and moved around more, you have Michael Caruso and Alan Gurr and Clayton Pine, those guys from New South Wales.
Good crew of racers, mate. Tough competition, hey?
Yeah, there was a lot of good guys. So, and there's guys from Adelaide, Jamie Carter, he was good. There's a whole bunch of different guys. And, obviously a lot of them have gone on, to be successful. And, yeah, it was a good time to be racing.
Don't underrate your own efforts here, mate. Is there an Oceania title on the shelf? Tell me about some of that stuff.
Yeah, so that was 1997. So so they'd always run the Oceania Championship up in at Oran Park, and then it moved down to Melbourne. Then 97 at Todd Road there, and I had not raced, junior. It was called Junior Intercontinental A at that time. And, we spent a lot of time out there, me and Bart, developing the karts for Drew, and out at Todd Road testing a lot. And, I ended up winning that race, my first race in that, I think. So it was all those guys I just rattled off. They were all the ones racing too. And I think I chased down Clayton Pine past him and won that race. And it was weird afterwards. They actually disqualified me. For the most random thing. My spare engine had a exhaust temp sensor in it that was sitting in the trailer, and they tried to had data logging on the cart, which you could just look at it and know. But I think the head official, he was from France, and I think he was Belgium. I don't know, but he had it out from my dad from a fight they had back in the 80s. So he was out to get me. So anyway, we won the appeal anyway, and I won. So it was the weirdest thing ever. But yeah, that was a cool experience, that's for sure.
You brought up your dad there and karting for a moment. Is there a little yarn in? Maybe you won't like this, but did he get barred from the track for a little while? And you would take your younger brother, and you actually kind of quite enjoyed that, didn't you? That whole phase of taking your younger brother and looking after him in the kart.
Yeah, for sure. I think my dad's a fiery character, but this instance, I don't even think I was at the track when this happened. I think he was there with my brother, and he hit an official's hat off his head. Like it was the most random thing, and then he ended up getting thrown out. So, yeah, it was just me and Benny, and that was before I could drive. So then another guy, Rob Macri, who's sadly not with us anymore, he used to drive us around, and then eventually, I was old enough to drive, so then I'd take Benny everywhere, and Dad didn't really come anymore. So. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, just me and Benny, and yeah, we had a lot of success.
You in the travelling around the country, I think Jack Perkins said to me that when you raced in Adelaide or South Australia, for example, in the for the state championships down there, was it Colin Mote that would actually build a custom kart of sorts for you? And Motey had a connection to Russell Ingall back in the day when Ingall was a gun in karts too, didn't he? Yeah,
so that was what year would that have been? 98 maybe, I think, or something. Yeah, Modi, he was Russell's guy. I used to build all Russell's karts back in the day, and it was Modi and Russell and Bobby Smith, who used to help me a lot, and who was Russell's mechanic forever. And we went out there and he built me a special kart, and I think we were leading that race, and something went wrong with the engine, and it was but that. Yeah, he helped me a lot too. He was a good dude. We used to go and stay at his house and have a good old time.
Awesome. The natural progression, James, is Formula Ford. It's been the tried and tested pathway for youngsters like yourself when you've come out of karting, and you did head that direction. How big a kind of sacrifice was that for the family to begin with? I think you looked at a McGale at one point, didn't you? But it wasn't the competitive beast you thought it would be, and so on.
Yeah, so I think so I started, we first went Formula Ford racing in 2000, I think it was. Yeah, 2000, and we bought, I think it was Aaron McNally from Perth. We bought his 96B, I think, through Brett Lupton, and we ran that in the State Series, and that was, my first foray into, bigger cars. And then for 2001, we got a McGale. My dad obviously knew Dougal McDougall really well, and he was the importer at the time. And I think Luke Youlden and Greg Ritter had been, running McGales. And then the 01 car came in, and it was an absolute lemon. And, we were running it ourselves. And I think, Will was in the 01 VD with Mick Ritter, and Jamie was in Luke Youlden's 2000 McGale, I think, and which was a lot better. So we kind of struggled through that year, and we tried to do the full season, and it was a little up and down, and obviously we weren't that competitive, to be honest. And then the year after, we did just a handful of races. And that's when I started really getting into more of an understanding of the whole vehicle dynamics of a car. Because, I used to try and work out, I was doing all the engineering work, and all the stuff on the geometry or whatever, and the motion ratios and all the roll stiffness and everything like that. And we started working and testing to try and make that car better. And then ultimately in '03, I just went over and we measured at a Van Diemen and tried to copy the geometry and motion ratios and everything. And we did some more races that year. And I think I ended up winning the national round at Sandown, the last race of the year, in that car. And finally we got it good. And then the year after, I then went and drove for Mick in a Van Diemen. And we kept running that McGale and for another guy and in the state series. And he actually won the state championship. So that car still resides at my dad's shop. One day I'm going to go back and put it in the historics, I think.
I want to just touch quickly on Sonic. I mean, you mentioned Mick Ritter there. So that was a 4-car team back then, which included, mate, David Reynolds, Michael Trimble, Bryce Washington, who I think you mentioned before, and Davey Reynolds would actually win the championship that year. So you're in some pretty good company in that operation, and that team has a proven kind of ethos, mate. They're great at helping to shape young people in the motor racing environments, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they're awesome. Mick and Maria, they're great people. And then, you have Graham Ritter, Mick's dad, he's an absolute legend. I love him. And, I was lucky that year, my mechanic was Ashley Seawood, and, I learned a lot from him and Mick, just the way they go about their racing and the attention to detail they pay with everything. And, it was a fun year. We had, a lot of good races and then, some bad ones. And, I felt like we could have won the championship that year if we just, I made mistakes. We had some mechanical issues and I lost my head a couple of times. And I think I got black flagged and disqualified one time while leading. And it was just, I don't know, it was one of those years where I felt like maybe I did it to myself, but the officials are out to get me. And I don't know, it was odd, but it was awesome that Dave won. He's a good friend of mine still to this day.
One thing I love in your answer here, mate, and it's sort of filtered through a little bit, even Lee Diffie told me as well, that, you have a beautiful grounded nature about you, which you've kept to this day, despite the mammoth job that you now do in the premier level of NASCAR. But you have a competitive side, mate, don't you? You have a real inner determination about you. Was it evident at a young age, clearly?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I even saw schoolwork as a competition.
Did
always
you?
wanted. Oh yeah, like, like if we were studying, or if I knew somebody that was slightly smarter or better at something, I'd go and study with them to try and work out what they knew. And I just hate to lose. It eats me alive. That's why I don't gamble, because I can't stand losing. But it eats me up, and I just want to be the most competitive and most successful at everything I do, and just leave no stone unturned. It probably is a detriment in sometimes because I'm so anal about certain things, but, I think overall that's a better quality to have than not really giving a shit.
It's an essential quality, mate, for what you now do, and as an element of what's needed for success. Can I also just delve into the point you talked about in relation to the growing fascination with the engineering side, right? How much of that stemmed from maybe early lessons with Dad in the workshop, or how much of it was kind of you wanting to, or having this thirst and wanting to find out more? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I grew up, with my dad. He has a jack of all trades, but more spending a lot of time with him around engines, and I just didn't really care for that. And I was more interested in the cars themselves and the setup stuff and all of those little details. And really it was more like the go-karting stuff that really got me into that. Like, in a lot of the testing and development we used to go and do, with the Arrow stuff, and even on myself, and then working with my brother, like understanding like all the little small things you could do and going and changing something and the effect of that, and just that's probably, what got me more into it. And then just the technical side of like, reading all the magazines, like, the race car engineering and the circle track, magazine from over here. And that's, I just kind of soaked it all up, and I've always been interested in it and just understanding, all the things that make it tick and the little things you can do to make things go faster. So,
yeah.
They didn't teach you any of that at university. You just went there to get the piece of paper, really.
You did get to do the Formula SAE thing. Probably worth telling people a bit more about that don't know it. We often see young students at the Australian Formula One Grand Prix, for example, and talk a bit about the great work that they do, and that brings all the elements together in terms of engineering, of mechanical creation, if you will, and then even on the competitive side, James, doesn't it?
It's an interesting thing, and it's obviously changed a lot. It's almost, 17 years since I did it, and I think they're transitioned into some electric stuff, but they're still, even over here, that a lot of the really good guys, that I work with, especially the younger guys now, all came up through that, because it's not hard if you don't have connections in the racing industry or anything like that. It's hard to sink your teeth in and actually learn about that stuff, and it's a great platform. Some people talk down on it, but I still think it's a great thing to go and learn, and and then work in a team as well, of people working together, trying to divide tasks and work out how to do everything the most efficient way possible.
So you've got an engineering degree. Larry Perkins has given you a test. You've come through some racing yourself. Where's the defining moment for you where you decide, okay, I'm going to go the other side of outside the car, work on the other side of pit wall and focus on that? Where was that decision made, and how difficult was it for you to make that call?
Really, it was the start of 2007. I was still at school in 2006. It was my final year. And, that year I spent time, my dad and I were actually going to the races with Robert Smith, and when Nathan Pretty was running. We were kind of tag teaming the engineering on his car, and then eventually we went and actually ran Paul Morris's car for the last part of the year. And I was then trying to do that thing after I tested with Larry, and I was going to go and try and do development series the year after. And Paul was actually going to help, fund it. And then I was going to pay him back once I found all the sponsorship. And because it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. So at that point, I was still all set on racing. And it wasn't until, that phone call, Larry, I still remember I was sitting at my desk in my bedroom, and Larry's like, rings me up and he's like, "Hey, Cock," and he's like, we have to pull the pin on this deal. I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, the other guy who was bringing more of the money, I think it was actually Shannon O'Brien, and he was going to go and drive the second car, and he pulled out. So he's like, "We're just going to shut the whole program down." And I was like, "Oh, man, all right." So I ring Paul, and I'm like, "This is what's happening." He's like, "Oh, shit." Well, he's like, "Well, you can come and work for me." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." I didn't really want to move to Queensland at that point. And so there was a couple of ads at the time in Auto Action, I think, for jobs. I'm like, I got to get a job now. Like, sure. I've got my degree. I've got no racing prospects. I've got no money. And one of the jobs was with Gary Rogers. So, and obviously my dad as well. I say my dad all the time, but he goes way back with Gary. So I ring Gary, and he's like, "Yep, come and have an interview with me." And I had to go to New Zealand for a Formula Toyota race to go and work over there. And so I went and saw him when I got back, and he interviewed him, and he took me around to see Steve Kramer and make sure, because he was engineering the other car, and make sure he was okay with me. And then he rang me up, and I thought it went well. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this is cool." And he rang me up, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to pay you $30,000 a year." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Well, respectfully, I'm like, I can go and make more money packing boxes, Gary, so I'm going to have to decline." So then he's like, "All right, give me give me 10 minutes or whatever, or give me 30 minutes. Literally, he rings me back in 5 minutes. And he's like, all right, I'll give you, what did he say? I think he said, I'll give you 35 and we'll review it in a month or whatever. It was something like that. Or maybe it was 40. I don't know. It was still not much money because a lot of my friends, and it's not about the money. It's never been for me. But some of my friends were going to go and work for Holden or whatever at that time, and they were making like 65,000 or something. And so eventually I said yes, and so I went, and it was to go and race engineer Lee Holdsworth's car.
Holdsworth, yeah.
To this day, and that was really the last time I ever. Oh, there was maybe one time that year that I considered driving after Gary gave me a test. He was trying to get me to drive the year after, and I said no. But at that point I was all in on engineering, and I'm to this day I wouldn't be here without Gary Rogers, giving me that opportunity, and I'll always appreciate that. And same with Paul. Those two guys helped me a lot in the early side of my career.
So, I mean, was it a little kind of bittersweet moment in the sense that the engineering thing you had studied in, there was obviously a future there, and you committed to that path, but you were more or less closing the door on the driving chapter, mate. When that can't have been easy. No,
it wasn't, and I don't think it was probably until 2009 or 2010 that I was finally fully over it.
Really?
'Cause, I think I always kind of questioned, if I'd made the right decision or not, because I think the first time I met Lee, we were driving Smithy's car at Winton the same day, a test. It was the first day he drove a supercar and the first day I did. And it
was a little bit of a shootout for memory too, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, I still think I was faster than him to this day, but I guarantee I was. And then the funny thing was that year, is that so they used to do a rookie day or a rookie shakedown day or whatever. So the middle of the year, because that was when the VT was coming along. No, the VE was coming along, and we started the year with the old car in the middle, and then we finally got the new car in the middle of the year. So we went to Winton and did a driver evaluation day, I think it was called. So Lee was allowed to do 10 or 20 laps, I think 20 laps. And then I could do it all. So I went out in the car first, shook it down. Then Lee got in. And then I went back out and went faster than him. And then Lee got back in and went faster than me. And then I went back in. I think it was and that's after that. That's when Gary's like, so do you want to drive? And he said, so in part of his negotiations to get me to stay the year after, he was trying to, instead of paying me more money, he wanted to...
give you a drive.
He wanted to give me 3 development series races and drive in the endurance races, but I still had to engineer Lee's car on all the... I was like, yeah, that's great, but being the perfectionist I am, I'm like, I don't think I could do either, to the ability that would be required to be successful, and ultimately I said no, and that's probably the last real chance I had, you know what I mean? That I questioned for a little while if that was the right decision or not.
Great indication of your makeup, though, mate, that you could see the need to knuckle down and apply to one or the other, basically.
Yeah. I just, you have to be all in on whatever you're doing. You can't, especially if you want to be, the best at it. So
well done. Great takeaway for those that are listening. I love that shootout story. Lee's been on the podcast as well, and the hilarious part, mate, is that you were both kind of as youngsters. You're trying to make it. You're scrambling, so that's why you were beating each other. Is because there was so much riding on it for each of you in that shootout, wasn't there?
Yeah. So anyway, but it was good. We had a good year, and I love working with Lee. It was it was good, and win with him and all that, and then see him to go on to a really long career is, was great.
It sure was one hell of a career for Lee, including 510 races, and in there a Bathurst 1000 victory. Lee's story is one of our favourites, and you can hear it back in the garage.
I was just praying that we didn't have another tyre failure. And I just didn't relax up until I thought when he came out of, all the team were up and about, when he came out of Forest Elbow, and I thought, can still have a tyre failure down Conrod here. So
you were thinking that?
Honestly, I just thought, I never ever, I get ahead of myself sometimes, and I thought, I'm not getting ahead of myself here. And I waited until he was in the chase, and then I thought, we got it, we've won. And yeah, ran over to the fence and celebrated really hard.
How'd that feel?
Oh, incredible. Like at the time, I think I was that stressed and that had that much adrenaline that it hadn't sunk in yet. Like it was quite strange. And I reckon I get more emotional about it now than what I did at the time. Was like, we just won Bathurst and it just wasn't registering in my head that we'd actually done it.
That is Leo and Rusty from 2022. Now back to James, all the way from Charlotte. That's my neck of the woods.
Gary is, I mean, your families knew each other obviously, but Gary, probably a bit like Larry in many ways, is a huge believer in hard work ethic, and sometimes you can end up doing very boring, basic jobs until you get sort of established and so on. What were the early learnings from Gary Rogers Motorsport?
Well, yeah, it was a little weird because I came in there and, there was obviously Pierre Aussie, and I saw what they were doing on a few things, and I had spoken to Lee, and I was like, this doesn't make too much sense to me. And I was a lot more fiery back then than I am now. So there was a point there where it wasn't too long after I started, and it was before we went to our first test, and I'm like, I think we need to do all these things, and I want to try this with the shocks, and, change the front geometry and this, and do this in the rear and all this, and they told me, no, we can't do that, or we can't do the shocks or whatever. So I was like, I think I went to Shirl, and I lost my mind and said a few expletives and whatever. And then Gary got involved, and I think they're like, oh, let him do what he wants. So we went to the test and we tried all these things. Everything we tried was better. And I think at the end of the test, at that point, from memory, I think that was the fastest a GRM car had ever gone around there. And I think Lee was second in the test behind Mark Winterbottom. And so we went to Clipsal like that. We, that same philosophy, and qualified in the top 10 and both days. And I think we DNF'd the first day because of a power steering issue. And I think we finished 8th or something the next day. And that was like the best, results they'd had. And, we just kind of built on that for the rest of the year. And I don't know, that gave me confidence. And I think, it gave the team confidence in me and what we were doing. And, we kind of exceeded everybody's expectations, but it was a little weird to start with. But after all that, it was everyone came on board, and it was a good year. And there were such good people there, Shirl and Gary and Les and all those guys, and there's a bunch of guys. I met one of my good friends, my mechanic back then, Cam Stevens, who was around forever. Just such great people to work with.
You get to taste from memory some success with them too, didn't you? Tell us about that day. Yeah,
so that was, I think we qualified 4th that weekend. It was a good weekend. And Sunday. It's
going to be some weather, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was going to be wet, and we're on the grid, and I'm like, it's gonna fucking rain. Like, I know it's going to rain. And I said to Lee, we're starting on wets, I actually think we had the wet set up in the car too. And so I think we finished the first 2 races in the dry, like around 4th or whatever. And then we changed the car as well. I'm like, it's going to rain. So we put the wets on. Literally on the parade lap back around to the grid, it started raining. And like everybody, like all these gurus that all went on slicks and whatever, they're all peeling off. I think there was only a few of us that started on wets. And Lee just killed the field. Like, even the people, no one was even close. You know what I mean? And we just, it was actually easy after that. I'm sure it wasn't for him, but it was an awesome day for, and they hadn't won for a while, and to get a win like that in dominating fashion, not like a reverse grid win or something. That was awesome for everybody.
He'd been a battler. It meant so much to him. I know he's reflected that in the podcast conversation we've had. I can vividly recall it from my time with supercars and so on. But was that the moment that you felt kind of cemented in that supercar paddock? Because you're talking in Australia, you're talking that the pinnacle of sort of domestic competition, aren't you, mate? It's a tough environment.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess so. There's a weird question. I was still very young. I was only 23, 24 years old. So maybe people didn't, I don't know. Certain people maybe didn't think that, or maybe thought it was lucky. I don't know. You had a lot of guys and older guys that had been around for a while. And
time, yeah.
I honestly think, maybe it took maybe a couple more years. It was maybe after we went, after I left GRM and went to Paul's and started having the success with Russell, that maybe people started to maybe think a bit more of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In the move to Paul's from Larry's, was that a difficult thing? Was it just that I think your dad had a connection with Paul's at the time there as well? Was it the sort of thing where you just thought, from a progression point of view, you wanted to try it? What happened there?
So one of the big things was, Paul had offered me a job that year, and I had said no because I didn't want to move from Melbourne. And but the big thing he was offering, we'd spoken about in a lot of conversations about, bringing a car to America, doing a lot of testing, doing the wind tunnel testing, the 7-post testing, the KNC testing, and trying to develop some simulation tools. And he was going to allow me to go and be like the head engineer and run the engineering department. And, that was an opportunity through all of that, and coming over here to get experience that I couldn't say no to. It was like that was a once in a lifetime chance, essentially, to go and show that, that we could do it ourselves almost. And, I was lucky. My data engineer that year at Gary Rogers was Brad Rashusen, that still works at, FPR today, or whatever they call themselves these days. So he came with me as well, because, he was all in on that as well. And, we got, some good pay rises and, but it was just the opportunity for us. And, there was a couple other guys, and my friend Timmy Newton, he came up there and worked. And, it was almost like being back in school. It was like four of us really, and Joel Binney that was also up there still. And then my dad was kind of the team manager, and we pretty much had a free for all. We could do what we wanted, design what we wanted. We had an amazing machine shop, and water jet cutter, and just everything, and great fabricators. And we learn a lot in America. On the aero side as well, and certain things, and we were just able to apply all that. And it was sad we didn't actually win a race in '08, but we had a hell of a year. And I think everybody was kind of thinking Russell was done, and we kept just kept punching on, and we're always up the front. So it was a good time. Am I right in saying that you met Dale Earnhardt Jr. during that American trip?
Yeah. and there may have been a conversation, I'm paraphrasing here, so I may not get this right, but you certainly expressed an interest to one day come back and work in NASCAR. Am I right?
Yeah, so that trip at the start of '08, that was the time when I'm like, I'm going to come and work over here. I always had aspirations to I wanted to go and work overseas, whether it was Formula One or NASCAR. And, we came over here for 2 weeks, I think, and, we had a lot of fun too, and had a few parties and and all of that. But it was a very, it was a big culture shock, you know what I mean? Like, it's very different, and, you kind of understood, but the technology and the money behind everything, when you started walking through some of these shops and, speaking to these people, it was like pretty mind blowing, for us, for what we had out there. And, that whet my appetite. And, I knew it was only a matter of time that eventually I'd, try and come over here and try and make a career of it. So, yeah, that trip, once again changed my life. And, I was thankful that we got to do it.
Was it the enormity? Was it the racing? I mean, you already knew about it from your dad in many respects, but seeing it in a first-hand sense and then experiencing it like that where you are meeting people like Dale away from the track and so on, did that just enhance the desire to go, mate?
Yeah. So I think the first time I met him, he walked in, he's like, I'm fucking Dale Junior. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no shit. Yeah. I'm like, I'm James. And I think we were in his shop there on his property, and he was trying to get me to drink moonshine. And I was like, yeah, I was like, this is nuts. What they have back then, they had the DMP, the Dirty Mo Posse or whatever, and they were down there hanging out. And obviously Owen Kelly was over here at the time. He came over because, it wasn't long after, as you know, that I think that year he drove Dale Jr.'s late models, and I think it was 08. And I think Keselowski was driving for him at the time. He just started in the Busch Series or Xfinity Series, whatever they call it then, nationwide, and he was there starting fires, and it was just the most random time ever. And there's a lot of people that I met on that trip that now I know more of who they are or whatever, or what they got up to after. And I don't know, that was fun time. So I'll never forget any of that week.
Can we fast track a little bit of the supercar career here before we get to NASCAR, mate? There's a period there, I think, with Kelly's, with Dave Reynolds, and then ultimately with FPR, as you said before. They're now Tickford Racing. But one of the standouts, mate, is winning Bathurst with Mark Winterbottom and Stephen Richards in 2013. Take us back to that day. Yeah,
that was still one of the most amazing days in my career, and I'd always wanted to win Bathurst. I love to try and win the championship, but Bathurst was the number one thing. And, obviously my dad had won it a couple of times, and, I wanted to emulate him. And, and I just knew, I don't know, I'd kind of already made my decision that I was going to move to America the year after, but I wanted to win so bad before we left. I did not want to have to go back and try and win. And it was a weird weekend. Like, I just had this feeling that we were going to win. Like, I think I said this on one other podcast I did a while ago. Like, I've never had this feeling ever that I knew we were going to win, like in any race. And I think I told the guys on Saturday night before we put the cover on, and maybe Alan Contarino, Mark's father-in-law, I'm like, we're going to win tomorrow. It's fine. It was going to win. And, it just all worked out. Everything kind of went to plan, and we had that tight finish at the end with Jamie. And, that whole day, Richo did an immense job. I still think he went faster than Mark that day. Like, he was on it, and he got us where we needed to be. And obviously Mark did an awesome job all race and at the end. And to be a part of that, that group of people that had been trying for so many years, a lot of those guys there had even worked for Glenn Seaton, and been disappointed so many times. And, like guys like Chris O'Toole and things like that, like to be in pit lane when we crossed the line and see the emotion on everybody's faces, I'll never forget that.
Tell me what gave you that confidence. I mean, that's the sum of many parts, James, be it people, be it engineering, be it performance of your drivers. Why did you have that eerie belief that you could do this? Because not many people would express that, mate. Not many people would say that before a race of that magnitude. Hey.
It's just a weird question. That's like I said, it's still to this day. I felt we were well prepared, and practice had gone well, and we had a good year, and Richo had a lot of time in the car. We've made sure of that, like even in the tests, like trying to make sure that he was like really up to speed and, comfortable. And we just had a great combination. And I think, the year before gave me confidence, because we finished second with Dave and Dean, when I was on the 55, and that one still eats me alive. I still wear Dave out about that. But
do you?
Yeah, he should have just lunged Jamie. I keep saying to him, there's only ever one 50th anniversary Bathurst. So, but at least we won the 51st one. But Yeah, it was just a sum of everything, I think, and it was weird. As I said, I never had that feeling, but
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out. It was close to that didn't work out, but yeah, no, it was good. So, and it was an awesome year. We just had, I feel like we could have won a championship. We just had too many small issues and some mechanical things with transmissions and shocks and tire failures and silly things. But I really like working with Mark and Richo and all those guys.
That game, that event is a game where strategy is so vital too, mate, and your world is about strategy in many respects now. When did you get your sort of head around that, and how good are you at reading the race and moving and things, moving parts on the run and so on?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, especially there, because it's so it's so tricky. Like, especially it's a little different here, but there, like, you're always balancing against stopping, against how much fuel you have in the car and how fuel time, and you also got the driver time aspect there, and you're always thinking, if a safety car comes out this lap, what am I going to do? That's the way I always approached it. Like, you always had the plan in your head before it even happened. And, it's a long lap there for a racing lap. So you've got a little bit of time to think about it. And, I think those last two Bathursts I did, we got the strategy both years, really well. And, you've also got help there, like your data engineers, with all the fuel and everything. So you're all working there together. And, it's I kind of miss that aspect of racing. Like, we have strategy here, but it's quite different. It's not, you're not weighing up so many different things.
You alluded before to the fact that you'd more or less made your decision to go to America even before you won Bathurst, but you were hell bent on trying to win a 1000 before you left. When did you make that call, mate, that you were going to move to America, and how did that all come about?
So we raced Coda back in the start of 2013 there, and with the supercars, and then the week after, my brother and I actually flew from Austin to Charlotte, and I spent the week here. And prior to that, I'd lined up a couple of interviews, only with two teams, one at RCR and then another at Penske. So the RCR connection came through one of my dad's friend, Robbie Benson, who was an engine builder. Everybody kind of knows him out there. And he obviously, his last job over here was he managed the engine shop at DEI, and then they merged with ECR or RCR to form ECR. So he had a lot of connections there. And, so he interviewed there, and then interviewed at Penske with Tim Cindric. So that came through one of my brother's friends. He knew Tim quite well, and so went to the Penske shop after we had lunch, and spoke to all those guys, and they both offered me jobs. Pretty much the week after when I got back to Australia, they had the offers, and the issue with the Penske one is that they couldn't tell me where I was going to be or what I was going to be doing, and I really wanted to come over here and go on the road and work for a cup team. And so thankfully at Childress, they offered me a job as the second engineer on the 27 car with Paul Menard for the year after. So I took that one. That's what I told the Penske guys. That's why I had to go and do it. I needed to get everything happening in the visa and everything. So literally probably June, July, I'd put the wheels in motion that we were going to move. And that's how it all came about. So I knew, nobody else knew. My wife, obviously, well, she wasn't my wife at the time. My fiance knew, and we kind of just kept it under the radar and kind of kept lining everything up. And I actually haven't told anybody. I don't think that I knew that far back. I was very lucky, and I didn't know. Like, I thought, from here they're taking a huge chance on me, and so I didn't push them on money or anything. I'm like, gee, I'm just getting the opportunity to go over there. So, we had to take an extra mortgage out on our apartment out there and get the money together and all of that. So, it was a big commitment, and we had to go and get married just, so we could get our visas and things like that. So, it was a weird time, and I was just lucky it all worked out.
It sure has. You'd argue he absolutely made that luck with the way that he applied himself. That's the end of part 1 of my podcast with Aussie NASCAR crew chief James Small. There is another full lap for you to enjoy in the Rusty's Garage Library, and it's ready for you to fire up right now. So head over whenever you're ready. From working with another iconic NASCAR team, one that he was a huge fan of as a kid, to the tough moments of a new life a long way from family and friends. The supercars teams that kept calling, trying to lure him back, and why America is now home with lots of unfinished business.